So now with a basic understanding of how HTML functions, it's time to start taking a look at cascading style sheets language and how it can help us modify the elements within a web page. The first thing we're going to do though real quick is show you one of the ways to implement CSS, and that is to have it directly in the web document, which is not where we really want it, but there is a reason for doing it this way, and that deals with when we're sending out HTML emails to people, which is an advanced topic later on down the road. But for now, just to show the code in the page so we can see it and kind of work with it, we'll go this route first. Then we're going to move it into a CSS file and link it to the web page. So the first thing we're going to do is open up a style tag. Okay, and we can do a closing style tag here. And inside this style tag, we're going to create some style sheet language. And so everything I'm typing inside these two tags is actually a language, not something that's going to be shown on a web page, but it's being interpreted excuse me, as CSS. One of the first things I want to affect is the body element. In other words, everything inside the body, I would like to give it some rules. And so I'll type out the word body as the element that I'd like to affect, and in curly braces, I'm going to put down some rules, what we call declarations. I'm going to declare some things for the body elements so that the HTML interpreter can lay back onto the CSS language here to understand how we're going to modify the page. Now notice I have the homepage.html file. If you don't have it, quickly go ahead and pause and just type in everything you see on screen and save it somewhere on your drive where you know where it is. Mine's in the C:/test site folder that I created and the HTML course. So looking here, what I'd like to do is adjust the font family -FAMILY. So you see a little bit difference in syntax here for style sheet language, and I'd like it to be Arial. No quotes here, a little semicolon to stop the statement right there. So I've adjusted the font family against the body element within the document, which means anything encompassed inside these two tags, if it's possible to place this on it, will receive this rule. In other words, everything on our page right now is text, so that rule does apply to everything inside that body element. If I had image tags in there, which we'll get into a little bit later on, then I have clearly that font wouldn't apply to the image. So it's just the things that can accept this behavior, such as a font family of Arial. Let's go ahead and do a quick save here. And I'll pull open my browser window that has this file in it, or opened up in it. If I do a quick refresh here, we'll see that it does truly have the Arial font being applied. Now, it already had the Arial font on it from previous when we had the font tag set in there from the HTML course. But now, and clearly, if I right-click and view the source code of this particular live document, we can see that there are no font tags in here, and yet the body is now receiving a text of Arial instead of Times New Roman. If I were to pull this out of here, in other words, let's go back into our code, back into homepage.html, and let's just do a quick cut on this to get it out of there. Do a save, and reload the page again. Refresh it. You'll see that it is back to its standard text, or the default font of my browser. Now, here's the thing. I'm applying the style in this fashion, between style tags here and here. Now, another way that I could do this is actually in the body tag itself. So if I cut this back out of here, and actually go into the body tag and do a space and type in the style attribute equals, and then I can actually type it out like this, font-family, space Arial, like this, put a semicolon in there, and then close the quote for that style attribute. I can then save this and reload the page yet again, and of course it works the same way. Okay, great. So I've got choices, as we saw in the HTML portion of this information. We saw we could add a font tag with a face attribute to be Arial. And so now we've got it pretty much the same way. So does this solve the problem of managing multiple web pages in a single location? No, it doesn't. But this is the syntax of CSS. So back to our previous example where we had the style tag in here. What I can do is I can take out the style tags like this. I can then copy, or rather cut, this code from here. Let's go ahead and just leave us one line up in here because we're going to need to put a link tag in here in just a moment. The actual tag's name is link, not an anchor tag, which is what these are, but an actual link tag to put these together. Do a quick save on this and test the page just to make sure everything's happy. And refresh the document. And of course, everything's good to go. So now we're basic again here. Go back into our file here. What we want to do now is create a new file. Open up another instance of Notepad, for example. Just a nice blank instance of Notepad. And I'm going to paste the code that we just cut from that document into here. There we go. And I'm going to do a file save as. I'm going to save this in the same directory, my test site directory. And I'm going to change this to all files so I can see them all. What I'd really like to do is create a new folder, though. I'm going to create a new folder inside of my test site folder. And I'm going to call this folder Styles. So now I have a directory for just my style sheets. And I'm going to go ahead and click Save here. But I'm going to call this site style.css and hit Enter. So now we have a site style.css located in a style folder of our website. And so now what I need to do is bring in the link for that particular file. And the way that we can accomplish this is by just simply keying into the location necessary to apply the link tag, the LINK tag, not to be confused with an anchor tag, which is also known as a link tag. We're going to use the word link here. I'm putting this in the head element, by the way. Make sure we're inside the head element. Generally below the title is a good place to put meta tags and link tags and things like that. So we're going to type in link. Oops, not Leonc, but link. And it's href, which is the location of the file that I'd like it to bring in, is in the styles folder of the current directory we're in right now. Because remember, homepage.html does reside inside of the test site folder. And in this folder where we're at for our site, there's a styles folder. So I'm telling it to, from this web page that it's looking at the moment, to go into this folder and locate this file. So here we have styles as the folder / site style.css. Now something to bear in mind here is that if you're dealing with different server environments, which we'll get into later on down the line, follow case sensitivity. HTML is not case sensitive, but XHTML is. My rule of thumb is all languages are case sensitive. All file names are case sensitive. So try to follow case sensitivity, because when you deal with Linux versus Windows server environments, the case in the URL actually matters. So you have to make sure you follow it completely. So always try to follow your case sensitivity. Nice little side note there. We add a rel attribute to this that defines this as a style sheet to the browser. And then its type, its MIME type, which we'll get into a little later on in advanced topics down the road. The MIME type of this is of type text CSS. And then I'm going to put a little / and angle bracket at the end of this, just in case we get into a situation where we're dealing with XHTML environments. This isn't required right here. I could leave this like that. It'd be fine. But if I ever got into an XML namespace type situation, which you likely will in the future, get in the habit of closing all of your tags. In this case, the link tag doesn't contain anything. It doesn't have, there's not an open and a closed tag for this like you see down here with the anchor tag, for example. It has an opening and it has a closing tag because it's wrapping around that content to make it a link. This isn't wrapping around anything. It's just telling the browser, hey, when you load this page, go up and grab this file too from the web server and bring it back in. We're not using a web server right now, but we will be in the future. But in this case, just go grab this file and bring it back in and hold it in memory. And by the way, it's a style sheet and its MIME type is text and it is of CSS type. So whatever we put in that style sheet file, which we know is more importantly this syntax here, body, font family, Arial. So whatever's pulled in by the browser at this point is held in memory. And it will apply those rules against the web page. Hence the name cascading styles. It comes from the top and cascades on down. And that rule is going to be important to recognize too as we start talking about the rules of CSS as we move forward. It always cascades down, which means that if something changes down in here in code, it can override what we set up in here. And we'll talk about that again later. But here, let's take a look at this. Let's do a quick file save, and let's open the browser back up and refresh the page. And looky here, we have Arial font being applied. If I right-click and view the source code without having that highlighted, if I right-click and view source code, we see there is nothing in the page that defines an Arial font. It's being controlled up here. Well, that's pretty cool. Let's click the link and see what happens. Oops, second page.html doesn't have these behaviors. Well, that's easy enough to fix. All we have to do now is go to our second page.html and add that line of text in here. This is a great way to do that is just open up this one, do a quick copy on this line, And now apply the same link tag to the second page here. And save the file. And bring it back up in the browser. Second page HTML is now getting the same rules applied to it. Pretty slick. What we now have is a file called styles or sitestyles.css that we can start adding declarations to that will modify the look and feel of our page. So as we move forward, we're going to look at doing that. We're going to be adding stuff to this file to modify the HTML page, and we'll be adding some more HTML to that document so that we can set things up to get into some really neat things. By the time we're done with this, we'll be ready to move into JavaScript, and that's where the whole world of functionality opens up, where we start to combine all three of these languages, and what you end up with is what's called DHTML, or dynamic HTML.